So now finally, in chapters 5 and 6, more than halfway into this gigantic book, Freud finally gets into how dreams are constructed. Like, this is where he talks about the different pieces of dreams and how they fit together. And this is what he calls the dream work. And now Freud insists that every single dream we have, literally every single one, according to Freud, is triggered by something that happened the previous day. It doesn't matter if the dream is about aliens, clowns, or like your ex that ghosted you 5 years ago, and now she shows up at like a dentist's office dream where you're about to get like a root canal. According to Freud, it doesn't matter. There's always a trace from what happened yesterday hiding somewhere in our dreams. He calls this the day residue. And then Freud discusses another source of dream content that he calls somatic and sensory experiences. Okay, you know how sometimes like you might be dreaming that you're swimming in the water or like you're by a river and then you wake up and you really need to pee? Or like you're dreaming about church bells and you wake up and your alarm clock was going off? That's what he's talking about here. And Freud argues that these bodily sensations or sensory experiences can trigger dreams or get woven into them. But again, he insists that these bodily sensations or sensory experiences, they don't dictate the dream's meaning. They just trigger the dream to start. And then the unconscious mind takes over and builds a whole entire story around it. And he actually argues this really well in the book. And he gives several examples, but I'm going to give you an example from one of my own dreams. And this is a completely insane dream that actually illustrates both day residue and somatic and sensory incorporation. So this was a few years ago during like the first year of grad school. And it was the week where we were discussing cluster B personality disorders. And I had been reading how antisocial personality disorder isn't just about being cold or manipulative, but it's about the behavior, crime, violence, impulsivity, complete disregard for the law, and just people that behave in ways that violate social norms. And I had been up all night through the evening, and I had been reading about this and learning about this. And that's when I went to bed with all of that spinning in my head. It was like all swirling in my head, all this antisocial behavior. And then I fall asleep. And that's when I had this completely crazy dream. I was in a high-speed chase on the freeway being chased by the police, and their sirens were blaring. And I was driving a stolen car. Like I had stolen this car that I was just trying to escape from the police from. And I was completely disregarding everybody's safety or concerns. I was crashing into other cars. I was running things over. I think I was crashing into people. And I was laughing about it in the dream like I was the freaking Joker. At one point, I even purposefully drove the car into a gas station to make things blow up, which we know that's not how things work in real life. But in dream logic, I drove my car, this car that I stole, I drove it into a gas station just to cause an explosion. And the police are chasing me with their sirens blaring the entire time. Finally, in the dream, I turned myself in to the police, begging for them to lock me up, saying that you can't let me out on the streets. I'm a danger to society. Please don't let me go. And then I woke up and my neighbor's car alarm had been going off right outside of my window. And it was synced up exactly with the police sirens that had been blaring in my dream. So to sum it up, my neighbor's car alarm going off was the sensory experience that triggered my dream, which my unconscious wrote a story about based on the day residue from the day before. I had been reading about antisocial personality disorder and people who behave in antisocial ways. Freud wrote about sensory experiences and day residue 125 years ago. Yet modern neuroscience and research largely backs him up on both of these points. So sleep labs show that recent experiences do get prioritized in our dreams, especially in the first 24 to 48 hours. So Freud's insistence that it was always something that happened the day before that triggers the older memories was half right. Recent experiences are more common in dreams, but the brain doesn't follow a strict yesterday-only rule. It's just that they are far more likely to get brought up in dreams than older memories. But still, for someone who was theorizing without like modern day lab equipment like fMRI scans, That was pretty on point. I mean, that was 1900, man. That was some pretty good theory. And the other thing, studies also show that sensory input and bodily sensations absolutely influence dreams. But the dream's meaning isn't dictated by the body. The brain doesn't just record the stimulus. It weaves it into whatever emotional or cognitive material it was already chewing on. Okay, but now here's where I started pushing back on Freud a bit. He insists that every detail and element in a dream, no matter how trivial, has major psychological significance. But now I'm wondering, what if some dreams are just like noise, like background noise? Like when your computer is running a screensaver, right? They're not processing deep files or running complicated software. The screensaver is just a way of keeping the monitor active, right? I can't help but feel that sometimes that's what dreams are. They're just like our mind's way of doing something while the body is asleep. Another way to put it would be like when you watch a popcorn movie, right? We hear about things like popcorn movies. Not every film needs to be Citizen Kane or Schindler's List. Sometimes we just want to put on like Sharknado or some mindless action film so we could kind of just like chill out and give our bodies and minds a chance to just decompress. We don't want to watch something very complicated with deep meaning. But then the more I think about that, the more I'm like, man, even schlocky popcorn movies like Sharknado are loaded with social commentary, even if it was unintentional by the filmmakers, right? Art is always reflective of the time and culture it's created in. Maybe that's true for dreams too. Maybe even like the mindless, low-effort dreams our unconscious creates just to keep the mind active while we're asleep. Maybe those have deeper underlying meaning too. I don't know. The more I thought about this, the more I argued against myself. Maybe Freud is right. Maybe all of our dreams do have deeper meaning. Okay, so let's look to modern neuroscience and see what's going on. Some sleep researchers suggest that parts of our dream imagery might just be the brain staying active during sleep. Now, that doesn't mean they think the entire dream is unmotivated noise, but just that some elements of dreams function more as a screensaver program. Now, Freud would hate this idea. For him, every single dream, even the most random dream element, is something deeply meaningful once you properly analyze it. And now, the more I think about it, maybe he's right. Like, maybe more often than not, we do ascribe meaning to our dreams, even if our unconscious didn't intend to. But while I was writing this script and reflecting on it some more, I think I figured out the nuance Freud was trying to articulate, and maybe he got lost in his words a little bit. I think he was trying to distinguish intentional meaning from emergent meaning. So check this out. Going back to the film example, right? Sharknado wasn't trying to say anything, right? At least I don't think it was. But it still reflects something about the culture and the era that it was produced in, even if the filmmakers didn't intend to. Likewise, the unconscious mind might not always intend for a dream to have an underlying meaning. It isn't always trying to express deep material, but it still ends up telling us something about ourselves or the world we live in once our mind shapes it into a story. I think that's the difference between intentional meaning and emergent meaning. And I think that's the finer point Freud was trying to make. Maybe he just didn't have the vocabulary back in 1900 to make it. Okay, well, now let's quickly revisit condensation. This is the idea that dreams are like compressed files, and they pack huge amounts of unconscious material into a single image or symbol. And in the book, Freud uses one of his own dreams that he calls the botanical monograph. And he also gives another example of that he calls the autodidasker dream. But I want to give you another example from one of my own recent dreams that I think illustrates this concept of condensation really well. I mean, this dream basically built a whole international relations conference out of this one car that shows up in my dream. Okay, so in this dream, I'm walking with some woman. She's a little bit younger than me. She's about in her mid-30s, very calm, very pleasant. And we're just standing in a parking lot looking for her keys that she's dropped. And while I'm on the sidewalk looking for her keys, I look up and I see the logo on the car in front of me. And it says BRUGATTI. It's spelled like a mashup of Bugatti and Ferrari. But here's where it gets even more interesting. It's stylized like the Ferrari logo, but the car is actually a late 60s or early 70s Chevy Nova. It's like this American muscle car. Okay, so on this one object, on this one automobile, we have Ferrari, which is Italian, Bugatti, which is literally Italian, French, German, depending on what era and what part of the automobile we're talking about, a Chevy Nova, which is an American muscle car, and it's all welded together into this like luxury American, Italian, French, German muscle car hybrid. That's condensation like on steroids. Okay, so now back in the dream, this older guy walks up and he's very European looking. Like he just got off the plane in America and he's from Europe. And he's clearly the owner of this car, and he walks up to the car to get in. And I say, I don't know why, but in the dream I start speaking Italian. I say, buongiorno, and we start speaking in Italian. And he tells me that he just got out of jail for acting disorderly, and his car was impounded, and now he's picking up his impounded car, which is the BRUGATTI. So in the dream, I'm excited because I get to practice speaking Italian with someone, but the woman I'm with, she doesn't speak Italian. So I have to translate to her in English what me and this European gentleman who just got out of jail, what him and I are speaking about. And here's the wild part. The city that the dream is set in, it is a combination of both Los Angeles, the city where I've spent my entire adult life in, and also Bridgeport, Connecticut, the city I was born and lived in until I was 10 years old. So the dream is a combination of two cities on opposite sides of the country, Los Angeles, California, and Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I think the dream took place in the 1980s, even though I was the same age I am now in the dream. So in this tiny little moment, this like dream that probably took about 20 seconds, the dream compresses multiple countries, multiple car cultures, 2 cities, 2 languages. This is all jammed into this one coherent scene. And this is exactly what Freud means by condensation. And this is what gets cool. This dream also illustrates the concept Freud talks about next, which is displacement. Okay, so displacement is why the important emotional stuff shows up in completely unrelated or unfamiliar places in our dreams. In other words, the dream takes the intensity from something that actually matters that we might not want to process during our waking hours, and it shifts that onto an image that seems random or harmless. So instead of the dream saying to me, you feel out of place or you feel like you don't fit in anywhere you go, the dream displaces that emotion onto a car that doesn't belong to any country, or a city that doesn't belong to any coast or any nation or any state. And here's the thing, Freud would say this dream is also overdetermined. Overdetermined means that every one of these elements is in the dream because multiple psychological threads converged on it at the same time. So the dream didn't pick a Franco-Italo-German-American Chevy, Ferrari, Bugatti, Nova because it's clever or it was being creative. It picked it because it was the perfect dumping ground for a whole cluster of unconscious ideas that maybe I don't want to deal with during my waking hours. Identity, culture, belonging, mismatch, not fitting in, languages, childhood places, and adult places. The dream needed one object that could hold all of that. And this Frankenstein car fit the job perfectly. That's overdetermination. When one image or symbol does the emotional work of dozens of different associations. Okay, and then Freud's other big point kicks in, and that's representability. Dreams can't show you abstract thoughts like identity conflict or feeling out of place or multiple cultures inside of one person. They can only show you images, right? Those are like complicated thoughts that you can't really see visually. So your brain takes all of those abstract tensions and turns them into something visual. So like a composite car in a composite city. Dreams are basically saying, all right, what's the picture version of this emotional and psychological mess? and builds a story out of whatever sensory fragments that you've got. In total, that's what Freud calls the dream work. Condensation packs everything together. Displacement hides the unsettling emotional charges inside of something safer. Overdetermination explains why that image was chosen. And representability turns abstract conflicts into visuals. And the BRUGATTI dream illustrates all of those in about 20 seconds of REM sleep. So now that's all good and well for the parts of our dreams we remember, right? But what about the parts of our dreams we forget? Like, you know that feeling when you wake up in the morning and you know you had this big, epic, complex dream, but you can only remember parts of it. There's like a beginning and an ending, but there's like a huge part in the middle of it that you just can't remember. So I started thinking about all these different forgotten parts as missing reels back when movies were still shot on film. Or I think an even better, more updated example is like a video missing from a YouTube playlist. Like let's say you're watching some epic 10-part history series on Napoleon, and it's broken up into a playlist. And you watch parts 1, 2, and 3, and suddenly you skip to part 5, and you're wondering, wait a minute, why is Napoleon suddenly trapped on the island of Elba? Wasn't he just like in Egypt or something? Now he's in Elba. And then you realize part 4 is missing. You went from part 3 to part 5. So you kind of have to fill in the blanks based on the context you're working with. That seems incredibly similar to how we recall our dreams. And here's the thing, according to Freud, we forget the dream content because of active censorship. The mind is deliberately cutting out material that might be too threatening or unacceptable for our own conscious awareness. All right, so think about that YouTube playlist, right? And when you realize part 4 was deleted by YouTube because YouTube censors decided it was too sensitive for advertisers or audiences, so they deleted it. And now you can't watch it. You go right from part 3 to part 5. That's similar to like what Freud is talking about, why we forget our dreams. But now, is Freud right about this censorship theory? Modern neuroscience suggests it's more complicated, but he was partially right. So modern neuroscience says REM sleep messes with memory consolidation. Some dream content simply just like never gets recorded in the first place. So it's not censorship, it's just like bad recording. Like your hard drive was just malfunctioning and it didn't save the file that you wanted to save. Another reason modern neuroscience gives us is that we remember what stands out. Just like you forget most of the lunches you've ever eaten your entire life, but you remember the lunches that were like either really, really good or really, really bad, right? Cognitive science says that that's why we forget parts of our dreams too. The boring, meandering parts, we just don't remember them as well. It never stored them because it didn't think it was important. But there's a third reason, and this is where Freud was onto something. Psychological defense. And this is from modern neuroscience. Modern neuroscience says, yes, in specific cases where dream content is genuinely threatening or conflicts with our self-image, it will actively forget or resist us from remembering it once we wake up. So if you feel that resistance trying to remember a specific part of a dream, when there's that sense of, I know something was there, but I can't quite remember it anymore, that's Freud's censor at work. So where was Freud right and where was he wrong? He was right in that it is something that does happen. He was wrong in that it's not the only exclusive reason. There's other reasons we forget our dreams too. It's not always because of the censor. But again, for a guy theorizing in 1900s Vienna without modern sleep labs or fMRI scans or all this other stuff, that was pretty on point. But in any case, when you start to put all these different pieces together, Freud starts to look less like a psychoanalyst and more like the head of a movie studio, right? Dreams aren't random. They're like elaborate productions. You've got your raw footage, which is the day residue, body signals, sensory experiences, and these emotional leftovers. And then you've got the dream work that's doing the editing, splicing it all together. Condensation, displacement, overdetermination, censorship. And what we wake up with isn't really the full movie when you think about it. It's more like the producer's cut, the cut that the studio and the producers approved and released to theaters. That's the version our mind decided we're allowed to see. The parts of the dreams that we can't remember, those are the scenes that got cut out and left on the cutting room floor, and the director is probably upset about that, right? And maybe through analysis and through remembering and thinking about our dreams during our waking hours, we could reconstruct those missing scenes, and that would be like the director's cut that the studios end up releasing to streaming, right? I don't know if we're using that movie analogy, but what's more important is I think whether Freud got every detail right or not, his underlying point stands. The unconscious is doing real work at night. Dreams are like personal psychological films, compressed, edited, rearranged, that are trying to tell us something about who we are, even when parts of those dreams are missing because it got like deleted by the YouTube censors and it's missing from the playlist. But anyway, what do you guys think? Do your dreams ever feel edited or like parts of them are missing when you wake up in the morning? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. And we're almost at the end of Interpretation of Dreams. We're almost at the end of this gigantic book. But it's a great book if you haven't read it. It's fantastic. But we're at the very end now. We're getting into chapter 7. And as soon as we're done with this one, we're gonna do Dora, analysis of a case hysteria, which this lines up really well with the Interpretation of Dreams. And then we'll go into and then we're gonna do 3 essays. So those are next. So I think I've got about 2 more videos for the Interpretation of Dreams, and then we're going to jump into Dora, and then I'm going to do 3 essays. I had a video. I also read, I can't find it now, but back there somewhere. I also read jokes and their relation to the unconscious. It was pretty good, but he basically just goes over everything he talked about in the Interpretation of Dreams. He basically applies dream work to how we tell jokes. I don't know if I'm going to make a video about that one though. It was okay, but I don't think there's any episodic material work. Maybe I'll make a short about it. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button. Please consider subscribing. Hope you're having a great day, and I will see you in the next one.